Hi, everybody. Yeah, so my name's Phil Newman, as you've heard. Let's just get my slides up. So the subject that I'm talking about today is longevity. And longevity splits into two industries. There's the longevity now industry and the longevity next industry, which is the combination of wellness and biotech. And I'm going to talk to you about building a reliable demographic program for what you're doing with an industry. So many of you may be aware of the chasm theory, Geoffrey Moore's chasm theory, which is talking about the advent of a new market, right? So I jumped into longevity 8 years ago when it was at this very, very early stage. And the industry's moved on very much since then. So I started a website called Longevity.Technology, focusing on the industry to understand whether the industry was growing, what directions it was taking. That was 8 years ago. And of course, many of you are going to be aware now of where this industry is. Probably some of you have heard of Brian Johnson. Probably some of you are taking your own longevity to heart and you're actually doing something about it. But of course, the mainstream media have been very focused on longevity now. And of course, what's happening in the future is the way that biotech industries are going to start embracing longevity. So I've been in this industry for a while now. The industry is starting to reach peak hype. And there's a lot of very interesting things happening in the space now. And the reality is that I want to be very careful that this industry doesn't overhype. So a lot of the very serious people in this industry are working on very, very serious technology. But the concept of what we're all working on is to be able to slow down age and possibly extend age. And then the concepts of where we go in the future with immortality and those types of things, I'll talk about later. So there's no longevity operating system at the moment. There's a lot of people doing a lot of great work, but there's no one thread that you can run through to say that there's an industry standard at the moment. And by way of example, I don't know if any of you guys have had an age test. An age test is basically where you have the difference between your chronological age and your actual age in terms of your biology. It might be your epigenetics. This is a guy called Matt Kaberlein. He's a very serious person in the industry, and he did some blood tests. He took the same blood test, anonymized, put it into the system, and you can see that the age scores that he got were all over the place. So the reality is that, as I mentioned earlier, there are some very, very serious organizations, universities, government departments, really working on this concept of how do we measure human age, and then how can we be in a position where we actually help people to roll back that age. And it's very important because we need to be in an industry where we have a standard. A lot of the industries around here, whether they're driverless cars, power systems, they all end up working together. And the key thing is that, as we've already just heard, the longevity clinical space is growing very actively at the moment. And then that will be moving into major healthcare systems in the future. And then in the future beyond that, of course, we need to be in a position where we are developing drugs that are going to help people reduce their age in terms of their health span. And we need to be able to work studies over a much shorter period of time. Now, I don't know whether any of you have been to a longevity clinic, but the longevity clinic space is blowing up at the moment. You can see here, this is the number of millionaires around the world. So there are 24 million millionaires in America. So a lot of people are shooting at the 1% and the high net worth individuals. But the reality is that every country has got its own demographic problem associated with its longevity. So this is actually a sport and AI session. I'm not going to be talking about sport today, but of course you've got different types of people. You've got people that are motivated about their own health and longevity, and you've got people that don't get off their Netflix and don't get off their sofas. So the demographic issue that this whole longevity industry is moving into is incredibly exciting. So when you think about we as all human beings, we're in a position where median life expectancy is continuing to grow, and that's happening. This is a global figure, so it's global all around the world. But the reality is that people are living longer, but they're living shorter health spans. And you can see here that actually globally, people are spending nearly the last 10 years of their life in this period of morbidity when they're experiencing those diseases of aging. So this industry is a very interesting one at the moment. You've got the hype of the wellness sector, but actually you've got the demographic shifts of nations that are really going to be a very important part of all of this. And just by way of example, if you look at Germany, this is a classic population pyramid. You can see at the bottom these are all the babies coming through the system, and at the top is the older people just before they die. But you can see this mid-range, this Gen X range of people are really burdens to their society waiting to happen in the future. And even in Germany, they're starting to help people push out their retirement age and incentivize them to work longer. So the industry is leaning into some very, very interesting subject matter. And a lot of people ask me, is this an industry that's going to have a trigger point? Well, in reality, I don't think we're going to be able to have an absolute trigger point, but we're going to see in the rearview mirror that this industry is actually going to do what happened in obesity in the USA, which is the USA has reached peak obesity now. So we will have a GPT moment. Back in 2023, we called out the longevity drugs, the GLP-1 drugs, actually as the first generation of longevity drugs. And you can see here the New York Post actually is running stories now about where these people have actually been taking these drugs, and they've actually not only reduced their age burden, but they're also benefiting from enhanced cardiovascular system. And there's the concept, obviously, also of these drugs working with people with Alzheimer's and preventing mild cognitive impairment. So the drug aspect of longevity is a very, very big marketplace. There are a lot of studies going on with GLP-1s at the moment, but the reality is they're just one category of drugs, and there are many, many others out there. So you can see here that 12% of the US adult population are now on GLP-1 drugs, and we don't really know what the long-term effects of those are, but this represents a really, really interesting infrastructure for a nation that's obviously dealing with an obesity crisis. The crisis after obesity is obviously going to be the care crisis and that extension of the health span system. So by way of a big number, if everybody in the world lived one extra year, that would create $38 trillion of wealth. So the reality is this is an industry that is a macroeconomic industry. It's not hidden in biotech or hidden in the wellness sector. This is actually humanity and what the evolution of humanity in terms of our lifespan means financially. So we as an organization, we analyze the industry across 25 different domains of longevity. They're all in there. And if you're interested in any trends in the report, there's the QR there. You can read our reports there. They're completely free. And the way that we are working our business, we are a media business, but we're also very keen on building the ecosystem. And at the moment, there's not enough capital going into the longevity industry. It was about 8.3 billion last year, but there needs to be a lot more money. And when you compare it to other industries, we're nowhere near what we're achieving in terms of our income and investment associated with the size of the problem and the opportunity that we're creating. And this is a chart here that talks about what the first true longevity drug will look like. You can see these are the GLP-1 agonists, and then that spike there is what the first real true longevity drug will look like. So my business, we're actually moving from being a media business into a data business. We have this new platform that we're talking about, which is actually putting all of the crazy work that's going on in labs into a much more structured data system. So this is the equation that we're looking at. You know, how much activity is happening on the right-hand side? What is the attrition of those drugs as they go through the clinical pipeline? And what is the success of those drugs as they come out of the end? And it's complicated work, so we're building the AI for this at the moment. But the reality is that all of us in our bodies, we've got aging drivers happening through our bodies all the time. You manifest them, you know, in your 20s and 30s, and then they come out as diseases later. So the thing is if we're able to tune down those aging drivers within the body, we're going to be in a position where we're preventing disease from happening in the first place. So this is how we segment the marketplace. There are 10 levels of longevity. On the right-hand side here, you can see these are the consumer markets as they are at the moment. In the middle ground is really where the pharmaceutical sector is going from being a sick care, disease management industry into being an aging prevention industry. And in the future, on the right-hand side, these are technologies that are being developed that are going to be able to help people actually reverse their age. And there's some very fascinating work happening now where you're taking cells and you're reprogramming the age of those cells, but those cells still actually know what they are, which is incredibly exciting. So these are the longevity biotech domains. Some of you may have heard of these. The one that people are very excited about is cellular reprogramming. So we're analyzing 900 biotechs in the space. And the very, very interesting thing, of course, as a news organization, we're seeing what these guys are doing all the time. But the reality is that the industry is getting very exciting. The biotech sector is starting to become like the tech sector. So we're starting to see megacorps working with smaller startups. we're seeing deal transactions happening, and as you can see in the case of Fauna there's actually nearly a $500 million deal on the table there for technology that's using hibernation biotech moving into longevity. So what we're doing with our platform, we're putting a lot of signals into our AI. We're now a fully fledged AI platform. And what we're looking at is really the assets of what all these organizations are doing. But the key thing is really what are they actually doing in terms of their progression towards the clinic. So we have this new system. It's called Decoding Longevity Trends. And we go through the process where we're now in a position where you can ask scientific questions of the chatbot, and then you're going to get therapeutic pathways after that. So the key thing that we're actually working on is the exciting bit, which is where our system is enabling drugs that are in development to synergize with drugs that are already approved in the marketplace, and actually be in a position where we can start to work on new novel therapeutics. So the pipeline for longevity biotech drugs is very, very full. You can see what happens with the GLP-1s and that chart where I showed you what that first longevity drug is going to look like. So if you're not in this industry, you're all human beings, you all are actually part of this industry, but this is actually going to be one of those industries that's going to grow very significantly over the next 10 to 15 years. And with the regulatory pathways that are happening, specifically in the US, where regulators are downgrading the regulation to accelerate these therapeutics to come through to market, this is going to be a very, very interesting industry. So if you're not in it already, or if you're a young person looking for a new career move, I would absolutely recommend that you start thinking about the longevity sector. So we're working with Big Pharma. The very exciting news is that Big Pharma is very, very focused on this longevity space. And if you would like any information about what I've shared with you today, please feel free to take my QR, and everything that we publish is very much free. So if you're interested in learning more about us, go to Longevity.Technology, and if you'd like any guidance on the industry, please just WhatsApp me or message me. So thank you very much for your time, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you.